Good to go.
Good morning. This is a convening of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, meeting number 511. I'm Jordan Maynard, and I'm serving as interim chair of the Gaming Commission. This meeting is being held virtually using remote collaboration technology, so we will do a roll call. Commissioner O'Brien.
I am here.
Good morning, Commissioner Hill.
Good morning, I'm here.
And good morning, Commissioner Skinner.
Good morning.
It's approximately 9:01, March 28th, and now that we've finished the roll call, let's get started. The meeting minutes. Typically, I introduce the meeting minutes as secretary, but I wanted to bring to the attention of my fellow commissioners that I did ask legal when I was going through how to set up this process. I realized I had to call it myself, and that seemed strange. Whether or not the statute had contemplated someone serving as interim chair or chair and secretary. It's unique. I'm not sure we dealt with it in the past. I did look at the succession plan that Commissioner O'Brien and I put together last year to see if it was contemplated. But the long and short is, after talking to legal, I wanted to see what Executive Director and Counselor Grossman had to say about it. Todd?
Good morning. Thank you. Ultimately, Commissioners, the statute does not, of course, squarely address this issue. It does talk about the chair, and then there's a separate section in Section 3 of Chapter 23K that talks about the appointment of the secretary and treasurer. My only take on this, and I don't think there's a great legal answer to this question necessarily, is that we should make sure that there are no incompatible functions that are performed by Commissioner Maynard as interim chair by contemporaneously serving as secretary. While I think it would be okay if he did both, you may consider, at least in this interim period while he's also acting as chair, have someone else become the secretary.
Thank you, Todd. I'm happy to do whatever my fellow commissioners thinks is best. I can continue serving as secretary, but I also don't want to hit those incompatible functions. Didn't know if anyone had any thoughts or if they wanted to temporarily do this.
Chair Maynard, I'm not jumping up and down to do this at this point, but I do realize that I am probably next up. Not even probably, I'm next up on in terms of the succession plan. So come on or around July 15th, I'd be taking on this role anyway, should my fellow commissioners vote that way. I defer to you in terms of any functions that you may see as incompatible with your current interim role. But I think it's a question for you to answer more than anything.
Okay, well, let's do this. Now that we've got it on the record, let's go ahead and table these minutes, right? June 29th and July 10th, if everyone's okay. And we can have a discussion on Wednesday how we want to move forward at agenda setting. Just add that to the list. Is that okay?
Mr. Chairman.
You'd have to mark it up as a vote because it's a vote of all of us. So you could talk about it at agenda, but you'd have to bump it and you have to put it on for an item for the next meeting because it has to be an official vote.
Yeah, I could also mark it up on the agenda, right, for a vote that day. We've discussed the issue here.
Right, but if you want a more fulsome conversation, you'd have to do it, discussion at agenda, mark it up for another vote. We normally don't have votes at agenda, but there's nothing that bars it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Commissioner Hill?
Mr. Chairman, I actually do not have an issue with you doing your job as secretary for these minutes today. They're before us. We have seen them. We have read them. We have no issue, I think, voting on them. We can have a further discussion on how we would like to move forward after today. You brought it up. Thank you. But for the meeting minutes for today that are before us, there's no reason why we would not take them up today. I don't want to push them off.
You okay with that, Commissioner O'Brien?
I agree with that. Let's just move them.
Thank you. Commissioner Skinner, you okay with that for today? All right. With that, I'll go ahead and make the motion. I move that the commission approve the minutes from the June 29th, 2023 and July 10th, 2023 public meetings that are included in the Commissioner's packet, subject to any necessary corrections for typographical errors or other non-material matters.
Second.
Okay, let's do the roll call. Commissioner O'Brien,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
and Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
And I vote yes, 4-0. Okay, thank you, and I appreciate everyone humoring me on that. We're now going to kick it back to Interim Executive Director and General Counsel Grossman for an update with Research and Responsible Gaming Director Mark Vanderlinden. Todd?
Good morning once again. And good morning, Mark. Welcome back. Are you prepared to discuss this legislation this morning?
Yes, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I'm prepared to give a brief update on the GRIT Act, or the Gambling Addiction Recovery Investment and Treatment Act. Just real quick, this was introduced by Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut as Senate Bill 3579 and Representative Salinas of Oregon as HR 6982. As a brief overview, there's currently no federal funding, nor has there been, designated for problem gambling treatment and research. The federal government, however, does levy an excise tax of 0.25% on all monies wagered on sports in the United States. Currently, that's deposited into the general fund. Just for some perspective, in 2021, that amounted to over $110 million. And as you can imagine, that will be significantly higher once it's reported for 2023. So the GRIT Act, what it would do is it's would set aside 50% of the federal excise tax for problem gambling addiction treatment and research. Specifically, 75% of that would be distributed to states for problem gambling addiction prevention and treatment through the existing SAMHSA, or Substance Abuse Treatment and Prevention Block Grant Program, and 25% would go through the National Institute of Drug Abuse to fund grants on researching problem gambling. It provides, I think what is really important, Massachusetts is very fortunate. We have set aside dollars to fund treatment, prevention, and our research agenda. This is not necessarily the case for a lot of states, for most states, as a matter of fact. So this could be considered a lifeline of funding that can support problem gambling treatment. And I think that it also would allow for significantly more research to be done. So right now, the last update is it's kind of making its rounds. There is no guarantee that this will be passed, but that's the update as it stands right now.
Thank you for that update, Mark. Do any of the fellow commissioners have any questions of Mark? Okay, seeing none. Councilor Grossman, did you have a comment?
No, nothing further. That's all we have for you this morning.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that update. The next agenda item is an update and report on the planned legislative breakfast. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everything is etched in stone. Invitations have gone out for our April 2nd legislative breakfast. It still is going to be in the members lounge between 10 and 11:30. And speaking on behalf of the Mass Gaming Commission to talk about some of the divisions that they oversee will be Derek Lennon, Joe Delaney, Mark Vanderlinden, and Dr. Lightbaum. We have already gotten quite a nice response from staff as well as legislators. So should be a nice breakfast, and looking forward to seeing you all there and meeting some of our new friends up in the legislature.
Does anyone have any questions of Commissioner Hill? Commissioner Skinner.
I do have a question. Thank you. Is this being marked up as a public meeting? Just trying to understand the parameters. No, not a public meeting. And
No,
so there's no active role for commissioners at this breakfast.
The only role that one may have is I may just get up and introduce you all, and then I will sit right back down again. At that point, we'll have our executive director on board, and I would probably see that he would MC the event from that point on.
Any other questions? And thank you for that one, Commissioner Skinner, for clarifying for the public that it will not be a public meeting and public business will not be occurring. I do want to thank you, Commissioner Hill, for all the work that you've done on this and others. We really appreciate it.
Thanks should go out to the team that I just read, as well as Grace and Tom Mills for putting this together, and Todd Grossman. We have a little committee that we kind of put together to make sure that this will go off without a hitch, and it is that crew that has made that happen.
Well, that's a good crew, so I'm glad to hear it. With that said, we're on to number 5. And that's going to be our IEB, Director Monahan, Carol O'Brien. I believe we have Dave McKay. And then I don't know, do I see Eric? Did I see Eric Kentel earlier on here? I just want to say,
Chair, I'm here.
I just want to say before we start that we would all like to congratulate Eric on his newly minted promotion to Casino Regulatory Manager at PPC. Didn't know if you want to say anything, Eric.
I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity. It's a pleasure working with my team, Dave Diorio, Burkane, and I'm just trying to transition into it. And I thank you very much for mentioning my name today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for serving in this role. With that said, I'll kick it over to whoever's leading this conversation under Section A. Caitlin?
As per usual, I will turn this right over to Director O'Brien and Dave McKay to lead 2 matters today. One relates to PPC's request for an amendment to a beverage license, and the second is for service registration exemptions.
Thank you.
Exactly. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I am also going to kick it over to Dave to talk about these 2 items.
Thank you, Kara. Good morning, Interim Chair and Commissioners. Before you this morning is a request from Plainridge Park Casino to amend its gaming beverage license, specifically for the food court licensed area. Previously, the food court licensed area contained 2 food outlets, Slice and Smash Burger. Neither outlet offered alcoholic beverage options. Recently, PPC made the business decision to reopen the Smash Burger outlet with a Wahlburgers. In addition to offering food menu items, Wahlburgers will also be offering alcoholic beverage options, specifically draft beer only. As discussed, starting on page 35 of the meeting packet, the application was reviewed by the Division of Licensing. The scope of this review also included verification pertaining to the licensed area manager, Ronald Robert, who is their food and beverage manager, and an on-site inspection was performed by Eric Cantel, IEB Casino Regulatory Manager, to confirm the accuracy of the reported licensed area information. This inspection also confirmed the licensed area's surveillance and security were in compliance and provided adequate coverage. I'd also like to note, we also worked with PPC's Lisa McKenney in relation to this beverage amendment, and the licensing division is recommending that the commission approve this amendment request. At this time, I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you may have.
Does anyone have any questions for Dave? Commissioners? Okay, this is marked up for a vote. I don't have any questions either. Thank you so much for the work that you put into this and for the explanation you just gave. We do have this marked up for a vote. So do we have a motion?
I move that the commission approve the amendment to Plainridge Park Casino's beverage license as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Do we have a second?
I think Commissioner Skinner seconded it, just for some reason there was a blip in her audio.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Skinner. All right, let's do a roll call. Commissioner O'Brien,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner,
Aye.
and
You
I
hear me?
vote yes. All right, I think we're sticking with you for our next conversation, Dave.
Yes, sir. This next request is coming from Encore Boston Harbor. In preparation for opening a new leased outlet restaurant, Seamark Seafood and Cocktails, Encore is requesting exemptions for 12 new positions. This restaurant will occupy the space that was formerly the Sinatra restaurant. This request is being made under the statutory provision enacted in 2017 that authorizes the commission to exempt certain job positions from the 23K registration requirements. As discussed starting on page 41 of your packet, this request was reviewed by the Division of Licensing, including the required exemption identification forms, complete job descriptions, and completed gaming licensee certifications. The positions that are being requested are as follows: executive chef, chef de cuisine, sous chef, dishwasher, line cook, prep cook, receiver, runner, busser, server, lead host, and host. I would note that currently the leased outlet Mystique at Encore has similar exempt positions. Additionally, I would also note when the space was formerly Sinatra, which was Encore owned and operated, the commission also afforded Encore similar exempt positions. I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you may have, but in summary, this is the request before you that we're asking you to vote on. I'd also like to note that our division worked with Kara Henson, Encore's Assistant Director of Recruiting and Employment, to obtain the necessary information to develop this request.
Thank you, Dave. Fellow commissioners, do we have any questions? Well, I just want to thank you, Dave, for your presentation. I looked over the 12 positions and the history of the positions we've exempted in the past, and I was okay with it myself. With that said, if there are no questions, ready for a motion.
I move that the commission approve Encore Boston Harbor's request for service registration exemptions as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today.
Second.
All right, let's do a roll call. Commissioner O'Brien,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner,
Aye.
and I vote yes, 4-0. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you to the IEB crew. Congratulations to EBH. And with that, we are going to move over to item number 6.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So this item is from our racing division and includes multiple requests. We're going to start out with, let me make sure I have my notes right, a request to escrow racehorse development funds. And for that, we're going to kick it over to Dr. Lightbound. Dr. Lightbound, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. So this morning, the first item is the request to escrow the Racehorse Development Fund monies. These are primarily funds that would have gone for thoroughbred purse money. And we began this discussion last summer. Since then, we've done some more research on it. Included in the packet is a letter from the treasurer that Director Lennon, CFAO Lennon had received. We also put it out for public comment again, and those comments are in your packet. And now I'll turn it over to Associate General Counsel Judith Young to take it from here.
Thanks, Dr. Lightbound. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Just as Dr. Lightbound had said, today's discussion is a continuation of the presentation that we gave last summer with myself, Dr. Lightbound, and representatives from the NEHBPA. So just as an overview, we discussed the request to escrow funds that we had received from the NEHBPA back in June and reviewed 23K Section 60, which is the overarching statute that discusses the Racehorse Development Fund. And then I moved into a presentation of 205 CMR 149 that discussed the process of escrowing funds and how that would look. Then we kind of took a step back from those regulations and talked about the big picture, with CFA O'Lennon providing a lot of insight and information into how the technical aspect of how those funds would be placed in escrow. I apologize, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. My screen keeps going black. I'm just going to see if I can fix it. And if not, we'll just continue going.
We
All
can
right.
hear you and see you, just so you know.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So kind of picking up from there, I wanted to quickly go over points of review of where we left our last discussion, and then kind of move forward into what Dr. Lightbound kind of touched on briefly, and some of our more present research. So just to kind of bring things full circle, there are 3 categories of distribution within the Racehorse Development Fund. Those are in fact set within 23K section 60. So in that distribution pile, you have 80% of funds being allocated towards purses, 16% of funds being allocated towards breeding efforts in the Commonwealth, and then 4% of those funds being earmarked for health and pension benefits. So that is necessarily set within statute. The allocations of those funds, however, were updated in 2021 by the Horse Racing Committee. And so the Horse Racing Committee took those 3 distributions and reallocated them differently after the 2019 cease of thoroughbred racing in the Commonwealth. So with that, the allocations of those 3 buckets were then placed to 92% of the 80% distribution going towards standardbred purses, 75% of the 16% distribution towards breeding going towards standardbred, and then again a 50-50 split of health and pension benefits going towards standardbred. So that's kind of where we find ourselves now and how those funds are allocated. However, all of that to say, there is still a large amount of thoroughbred purse money that is not necessarily being distributed in the Racehorse Development Fund, which kind of leads us here today and into this request from the NEHBPA. Moving back to the escrow of racehorse development funds, it's important to note, especially for our discussion today and to some of these considerations that we'll touch on later, is that the escrow of funds is not necessarily covered anywhere within statute or our enabling legislation for the Gaming Commission. We walked through 205 CMR 149 pretty substantially last time, and I will spare you that, but the regs are included in your packet on page 121 through 123. But most notably, I wanted to call out that the NEHBPA does not necessarily meet the definition of an association as listed within 205 CMR 149 and in the parallel definition of 205 CMR 3.00, which discusses harness horse racing, also known as standardbreds. And then lastly, and most notably, our research last presentation kind of touched on, but hadn't initially thoroughly concluded, that it appeared that the Office of the Treasurer had to authorize the creation of all accounts for all agencies in the Commonwealth, the Commission is included in that definition. So since that time and since that presentation, we've had some opportunities to go away, do some external research, and have additional conversations with the Office of the Treasurer and the Comptroller's Office. And now it is apparent that our regulation doesn't necessarily, if you forgive the expression, do justice to the process. So in a review of these regulations, our regulations makes it appear that the that the Commission solely has the authority to place funds in escrow. But in actuality, pursuant to MGL Chapter 29, Section 23, it's the Treasurer that manages all cash, funds, or investments under the control of a state agency. And as I previously stated, the Commission is in fact a state agency. Additionally, MGL Chapter 29, Section 34 prescribes that a state agency must obtain the Treasurer's consent to deposit all funds into a banking institution lawfully doing business with the Commonwealth, and that would include an escrow account. So while 149 makes it appear that the Commission can just authorize funds being placed into escrow for an association, it is in fact the Treasurer's office that would need to approve whether or not the Commission would create that escrow account prior to the commission doing so. So this regulation would likely need to be updated. We can discuss that later on as a policy consideration, but I did want to bring that up to you and just kind of fully conclude where our research brings it to us and then brings it to you today to discuss. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Dr. Lightbound and CFA Lennon, who were incredibly helpful in this project and bringing us forward and discussing some of the considerations that you all may have for this request.
Dr. Lightbound, CFA Lennon. Anything additional to what Judy just went over?
I do not have anything. I'll turn it over to Derek.
Yeah, and I think Judy hit all the highlights. And the one other consideration is outside Section 88 in House 2, which is looking to change these distributions for FY25. We already discussed that in a February 1st meeting. So, you got to consider timing on that as well.
Thank you. Questions by the commissioners?
So Derek, just so I'm clear on that, that was prospective, right? The outside section you're referencing. So the money that's in there now.
Okay. So
remain, correct?
So I could just let you think. Correct. The money that was in there now would remain. However, it was assumed during that thought process that, and I'm sorry for Eric. I'm sorry. So I apologize for the kind of like brain thought process here. But that was prospective, and part of the consideration was those balances would be used for FY25. Now we have some legislative issues there that we have to look at because, as Judy went over, 80% of the fund has to be used for purses, and out of the $23.7 million balance sitting there, 23.6 of it is for purses, so it can't be used. And it was dedicated by the horse racing committee for thoroughbred purses, so we couldn't do any breeding with that money in FY25. We couldn't pay for any health or welfare benefits, and we already talked about this on February 1st, some of the problems with it. As well as we would actually have to get the racing committee back together if we wanted to pay for any standard bred purses with that balance. So while it was prospective, there's still a problem that the money that's sitting there still really can't be used for anything but thoroughbred purses. So it would hurt breeding, it would hurt the purses for PPC in FY25, and it would also hurt the health and welfare benefits that people are receiving.
And in terms of the interest, how it is held now, interest inures to the general fund, right?
Correct. It all goes to the general fund.
Right. And then escrowing it would mean that the interest would inure back into the account, but it wouldn't change sort of, the prospective outside proposals that we have from the governor's office, right?
Correct. Money could, yes, to kind of elaborate on that thought, Commissioner, that money could still, I don't want to say at risk, but for lack of a better term, still be reallocated or redistributed or reassigned by someone else they're still technically Commonwealth funds.
Right.
And that would go either way, it sounds like, but that was a great line of questioning. Anything else, Commissioner O'Brien, or open the floor?
So I've had this come in front of me a number of times in the time that I've been here. With the state of thoroughbred being what it is, I understand why they're making the ask. But Judy, to your point about when you're looking at what is an association at this snapshot in time, it does not appear, we're not even at the jumping off point right now, just what the posture is for the association. So that's what I think.
So to that point, I did just think to myself, and I see Paul Umbrello on the screen. Hi, Paul. I didn't know he did submit a letter. I didn't know, since he was here today, if he just wanted to briefly give his perspective before I reopen it to the commissioners.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Yeah, I guess in listening to the comments, and I appreciate being able to speak, my concern here is the request isn't theoretically coming from the association and as the recognized horsemen's group, for us to escrow it, when I read the interpretation of CMR 205-149, I'm reading it as the commission has the authority just to protect that funding from any future redistribution for the next 3 years without live racing. So we're trying to just protect that fund still under the state's guidance for any other future investor coming in to build a racetrack. Even if it is, again, when I interpret the law, it could protect the standardbreds for future funding if we don't get a racetrack built this year. So we're just trying to protect that from theoretically a redistribution or a money grab for the future of thoroughbred purses, because without that future funding to fund purses based on that 92.8% split, there's not going to be enough funding for us if we, not if, but I will feel confident and say when we have a racetrack built, we need that money, kind of seed money, to kick off, you know, the whatever racing days there may be, which we have to start small and build into it. We would like to have that funding assured both for an investor and the horseman, that money, which again, in our interpretation, should have been deposited weekly into the horseman's account, and never was. We're just looking to get that protected, not under, you know, it's not going into a horseman's account. We're just kind of looking, I guess, for the commission and with the state to put it into an escrow account, collecting interest. Again, the interest I felt, which again, when you're talking about $20 million, is interest that could have been compounded into that account for us to be utilizing that as well. So we're losing that benefit of the funding. So all we're trying to do is just protect it for the future benefit of racing. And again, if that doesn't happen within 3 years, then the commission, in my interpretation, still has that authority to do what it feels right, whether it's for the best interest of the horsemen, the Commonwealth. You know, remember when dog racing was banded, the state went and helped the dog owners that had to either find new careers, new jobs. So look, we're just looking at making the requests, hoping that the commission would act accordingly to protect it in the future of thoroughbred racing. That was it in a nutshell, and why we make the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Umbrello, for sharing your view on the matter. And as Commissioner O'Brien and Judy just talked about, you know, part of this is up to the legislature and the governor and that process. And with that said, I saw Commissioner Hill had his mic off at one point. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Derek, I'm putting on my selectman's hat from like 25 years ago when the word arbitrage comes to mind. Is this affected at all with, if we were to collect, put this into an escrow account, we collect the escrow, do we fall under that? I remember the term, but I can't remember.
Yeah, arbitrage has to do with bonds. And that is when you take a non-interest bearing bond and pay it out to someone, they put it in an interest bearing account, and they're basically getting something that they're not entitled to. My definition may be off by a little bit. It's been about 10 years since I had to work with bond counsel on those, but that's what arbitrage deals with. It's dealing with a Commonwealth instrument that necessarily or you don't have to pay taxes on, and then you're gaining interest on it.
Thank you.
However, I do want to apologize to Eric Cantel for the way I said Eric earlier, so I apologize. I was a little rude.
I thought you were just welcoming him to his new position.
Yeah. Well, Eric is always getting work done over here. You know, when you sit down at PPC, it's a lively place.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you.
To add to my comments, Mr. Chairman, I am in agreement with Commissioner O'Brien with where we are and where we need to go at this point. I don't, with everything that's been explained to me today, I'm not sure that I'm ready to move to push these funds into an escrow account.
Commissioner Skinner, anything to add?
Briefly, aside from that threshold question, I'm satisfied with the representation that the commission does not have sole authority here in granting what's being requested. And so, Mr. Umbrello, I appreciate your comments today, both verbally and written. And I think that it's not an open and shut case, totally and completely. But I think for purposes of this discussion today, I don't think that we are there, unfortunately. Speaking as one commissioner.
Well, I think you were speaking as a third commissioner, and I will add a fourth to that voice and say that I agree with my fellow commissioners for all the reasons that they said. Because of this lack of authority and the conversations with the treasurer's office, I would say that there's consensus here. I don't know if anyone wanted to move to solidify, or if we just move on with the consensus.
So my position, I don't think we really need a vote today. And I think because there's nothing to be done. And my concern with an affirmative move to decline is some of my understanding, and Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, has to do with the posture that the horsemen are in and the viability of an imminent track. And so what I don't want to do is have us have a hard no, where then they are sort of pushing to fight back because they're going to know what's happening on the ground way faster than we are. And so as one commissioner, I'm comfortable saying that we've reached consensus declining without moving to say a hard no for any particular legal rationale. That's where I'm coming from. I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel.
That's fine with me, Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner Skinner, you good with that?
Yeah, same here.
I'm good with it too. Well, with that said, thank you. And again, thank you for your remarks, Mr. Umbrello. Thank you, Judy, Derek, and Dr. Lightbound for the analysis. And with that, let's move on to 6B, Dr. Lightbound.
Thanks.
So 6B is the approval of the Plain Ridge operating personnel and their racing officials. Steve O'Toole is on the meeting today. The people that are on the list have all been licensed with us before. There's nobody new. They've all worked for Plain Ridge before in various capacities. So my recommendation is that the commission approve this request pending the satisfactory completion of their licensure by the Gaming Commission Division of Racing and satisfactory completion of their background checks by the state police. Right now, these folks are in the process of getting their licenses, as we don't officially start till April 15th.
Thank you, Dr. Lightbound. Hi, Steve. Do you have anything to add?
Good morning, commissioners. No, I don't have anything to add. All these people have been with us for at least in the past. There's only one on the list that was with us about 2 years ago. He left for another position at Yonkers, and then we baited him back to Plain Ridge. So we're happy to have John Matero back with us. But other than that, they're all very familiar faces to Alex and the state police and the commission. But thank you.
John's in a good spot. All right. With that said, commissioners, do we have any questions for Dr. Lightbound or Steve? I know that we've all had time to review.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Hill.
I move that the commission approve the racing officials and key operating personnel of Plain Ridge Park Casino as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today.
Second.
All right. We have a motion from Commissioner Hill, second by Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
And I'm a yes, 4-0. Thank you. We're sticking with Dr. Lightbound, it looks like, with the waiver request of 205 CMR 3.127. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Lightbound?
Sure. Horses that haven't raced for 30 days are required to do a qualifying race. That's basically a race for no purse money and there's no betting on it. This gives the track veterinarians a chance to see the horse, make sure they're sound and in good shape. And it also gives the horse basically practice. We have approved this on a commission level since 2018. The track has come in and asked for it to be moved to 45 days. We haven't had any incidents with it being moved to that. And so again, I move that I recommend to the commission, that they approve this request again.
Any comments, other comments?
Dr. Lightbound, I guess the question I have, I know we've been doing this every year. And the question is it time to amend the reg to go to 45?
Commissioner
that's
O'Brien, I can jump in here, Alex, and
Dustin and Mike's plate. Yep.
right, that'll be coming before you in just I think actually the next commission meeting. We have a number of racing regs, and this is one of them. So this will be amended going forward. Yep.
Got it. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Hill.
I move that the commission approve the waiver of 205 CMR 3.127 for the 2024 racing season at the Plain Ridge Park Casino, as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today.
Second.
All right, let's do a roll call. And by the way, I was going to take Dr. Lightbound's motion on that, but anyways, Commissioner O'Brien,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner,
Aye.
and I vote yes. That's 4-0. I think, Dr. Lightbound, does that conclude your business for today?
If I could just take a quick moment to thank Judith Young and Derek Lennon very much for all their work on the escrow. They really did the majority of the work on that item. So I appreciate it.
That's a good pairing to put on that issue, and we also appreciate it. Good to see you, Steve.
Thank you, commissioners, for your action this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that said, we're ready to move to item 7, and for that, Director Vanderlinden, I see Dr. Andrews and Long. Going to start out with discussing the FY25 research agenda. Kick it over to you, Mark.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner Maynard, and good morning, commissioners. Yes, it's time for us to introduce the FY25 gaming research agenda. Just keep in mind, this is our first pass at this, and as we kind of march towards the beginning of the fiscal year, it will become more defined and more refined. So please keep that in mind. So just by a quick background, the Expanded Gaming Act enshrines the role of research and understanding the social and economic effects and mitigating the negative consequences of gambling in the Commonwealth. And to this end, we seek the advice of the Gaming Policy Advisory Commission to inform our work, and the Commission to adopt a FY25 research agenda to comprehensively assess the impacts of gaming in the Commonwealth. And there are 2 specific areas within statute where this is defined. The first being in the Expanded Gaming Act, Chapter 23K, Section 71, directs the research agenda to examine the social and economic effects of expanded gambling and to obtain scientific information relative to neuroscience, psychology, sociology, and epidemiology of gambling. This was extended to the Act to Regulate Sports Wagering, Chapter 23N, Section 23, so that we also have that authority to examine the effects of sports wagering in the Commonwealth. To support the implementation of this research agenda, the Commission adopted a strategic plan that outlines research into 7 lines of 7 key lines, including economic research, which is to analyze the fiscal and economic effects of gaming in the Commonwealth, as well as a social research agenda, which is to examine the social impacts of research. Both of these together are largely carried out by the UMass School of Public Health and Health Sciences in collaboration with the UMass Donahue Institute. They're intended to provide neutral information on decision-making, early warning signs of changes connected to gambling, and to help reduce gambling-related harm. We also have other lines of research, including the community-engaged research, which is to understand and address the impacts on specific Massachusetts communities. Largely funding in this category is directed to communities which are considered at greater risk of gambling-related harm. We have a line of research dedicated to public safety, examining the impacts on public safety, including crimes, calls for service, collisions, and driving under the influence. We engage in evaluating our responsible gaming programs, which Long Dan will talk a little bit about, and you're very familiar with at this point, including the Play My Way program, the GameSense program, and the voluntary self-exclusion program, and other programs that are around the bend for the commission. While the Massachusetts Gaming Impact Cohort has wound down a few years ago, it continues to be an important study that informs our strategies and practices. And that was a line of research. I guess that was a line of research that ended 3 years ago at this point. We are dedicated to data sharing through the Massachusetts Open Data Exchange, or MODE. We have over 20 data sets from the Sigma project that are available for research purposes. And so with that, I wanted to, all of this research is important. And as I start talking about the FY25 research agenda, I think it's important to just understand this is ongoing, and we have several projects that are currently underway. And I wanted Dr. Andrews to just provide a brief overview of that before I talk about the FY25. Bonnie?
Hi, Dr. Andrews.
Hello. Thank you, Director Van der Linden, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It's wonderful to be here to talk with you today about our current and ongoing and upcoming research efforts. And I don't know if it would be helpful for me to share my screen, or whether, okay, excellent. I can share my screen, and I just wanted to talk, before we move into the FY25 research agenda, I just wanted to move to talk a little bit about our ongoing and upcoming research efforts, to kind of give a little bit of context in terms of what the FY25 research agenda is going to be taking place in the context of. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, first of all, the social and economic research that is ongoing and briefly upcoming. We have, leading off, we have an integrated impact report, which is going to give a report looking at the overall social and economic impact since Plainridge Park Casino opened in 2015. We're also going to have an online panel survey assessing changes in gambling participation from 2022 to 2023, a report on out-of-state visitorship to Massachusetts casinos, an economic report on the early impact of sports wagering, and a report that's going to be upcoming on the impacts of advertising on gambling behavior in Massachusetts. In terms of public safety, we're going to be having a report on Plainville, so a report on public safety in Plainville and surrounding communities using data through 2023, as well as a study on the influence of casinos and casino resorts on sex trafficking in the Commonwealth. For community engaged research, we have one ongoing study that's focused on youth and sports wagering. And this is a study that's conducted by NORC at the University of Chicago, and is focused on the legalization of sports betting in Massachusetts and its impacts on young adults ages 18 to 25. As well as we're going to be funding a couple of additional community engaged research projects. And they're currently under review. So news, more to come on that. We're also—
Dr. Andrews?
Oh, yes.
Chair Maynard, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt you. When you say they're currently under review, could you elaborate a little bit on those two projects?
Absolutely. So we currently had a funding call for additional community engaged research projects. So we posted an open procurement asking for additional community engaged research projects, and we received proposals and are currently in the process of reviewing those proposals, and will be making awards shortly.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. And that's part of the FY24 research agenda that was approved last year.
Correct. Yeah.
And Commissioner Skinner, you reminded me, and I should have said it, because I can't see everyone because of the screen. Just jump in. Feel free to jump in if there are any questions to the commissioners.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then in terms of evaluation of responsible gaming initiatives, we have the GameSense evaluation, which is a 4-part evaluation of our GameSense program. That's also currently in the final stages of review with our research review committee. We have a study that's being funded through the International Center for Responsible Gaming that focuses on assessing whether mandatory versus voluntary limited adherence features and reward facilitates responsible gambling. And we also have a study that's going to be following up on Director van der Linden's presentation on risk identification and response. We're going to be having a study that focuses on both the use of AI in gaming and also risk identification and response that's going to be upcoming. We have 2 legislatively mandated studies related to sports wagering that are ongoing. The first is a prospective study on the feasibility and potential impact of allowing retail locations in the Commonwealth to operate sports wagering kiosks. We also have a study on diversity in the sports wagering industry. We're going to have a study on the impact of iGaming on public health, with particular focus on comparison of participants with participants in other forms of gaming, comorbidity with problem gambling, and impacts on youth under the age of 25. And lastly, we also have a program that's a collaboration with the Community Mitigation Fund at the Gaming Commission that is funding community engaged research projects. So we're going to be, we're currently in the process of reviewing proposals that have been received in our collaboration with the Community Mitigation Fund. So with that,
you saw that. So Dr. Andrews, can you talk about the 2 statutorily required studies and kind of what the timeline is? I know we initially were waiting to actually get sports wagering up and going, and I think we sent something to the legislature saying that, but where are we?
We did. Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. So we have the kiosk study, which has been awarded to Spectrum Gaming Group in collaboration with the Mass Council on Gaming and Health. And that study is going to be, there's going to be a first draft of that report that's going to undergo review that we're anticipating in the spring. So that's going to be within the next month or 2 that we're going to be we're going to be receiving that report and going through that process. And that's for the kiosk study. For the sports wagering diversity study, where that contract was awarded to the Donahue Institute at UMass. And for that study, we're currently in the process of engaging in data collection related to that study, and with that report anticipated later in the summer and early fall. So that's the status update on those 2 projects.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for reading my box.
Anytime.
And Commissioner Maynard, we launched this kiosk study much sooner than the sports wagering diversity study, because we wanted to make sure that there was time for the sports wagering industry to get stood up so that we would have more information and data to draw upon. So I don't believe that contract was finally awarded when December, maybe, Bonnie?
Yes, around
Wasn't
there.
that long ago.
Yeah, late 2023.
Yeah. So really both of those are on track of what we were anticipating at this point.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Bonnie, actually, would you mind just keeping your screen up and we can just scroll down through the FY25 research agenda, unless there are other questions about the ongoing research efforts at this point.
I think you're good.
Great. It's a lot, by the way. There's a lot there. And it's a constant juggling act to make sure that these are staying on track and moving forward. So with that said, we're always excited to talk about upcoming potential research studies as well, to keep this ongoing research agenda, that overall goal of understanding the effects of gambling within the Commonwealth. So again, this is our very first pass proposed research agenda. We welcome your feedback on this draft of it. You may have some questions that we'll need to go back and get some details from and provide some additional detail to. And at the end, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the timeline and where we need to go next with this. So the FY25 gambling research agenda is estimated to be $1,810,000. And this is slightly less than the FY24 research agenda. And as always, we will make sure that we are in close collaboration and communication with financial division to make sure that there's sufficient funding to support the research deliverables once we have an approved and final research agenda. Of special note, you've already seen what we're doing so far as it relates to sports wagering, and we have a few projects, one funded, one we believe will be funded relatively soon, that focuses on youth and sports wagering. And there's a continued commitment to make sure that we're paying attention to the impacts of sports wagering, especially with at-risk groups, including younger gamblers. So the FY25 research agenda that you see before you, it's outlined in a table that includes a general description of each project, the specific deliverables and activities, and a reference to the section, either 23K or 23N, that will that grounds the research that we are proposing. So the first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the social and economic research that's being proposed. And it's important to keep in mind, actually, we have had a contract with UMass Amherst and the School of Public Health and Health Sciences, and UMass in collaboration with the UMass Donahue Institute for SIGMA. We've had that since 2012 or 2012. And it's gone through a couple of procurements. Another one of those procurements is actually coming to an end at the end of FY25. And so as we describe the social and economic research that's being carried out by the SIGMA team, we have a specific intention that anything that's being proposed should be wrapped up by June 30th of 25. So with that said, there's still several projects and still a lot of opportunity for us to do some good work here. The first is an in-depth analysis, and I'll try to define all these acronyms here, I apologize. An in-depth analysis of the follow-up general population survey, which is final at this point, or the follow-up online panel survey and the online panel for survey for FY23. Keep in mind, just regarding online panels, so there was the follow-up general population survey, which was an address-based sampling methodology. And that was combined with an online panel, which uses an online panel in order to have greater value and be able to say more about gambling behaviors, attitudes in the Commonwealth. As an ongoing commitment and monitoring, we also have online panels that are being administered every year. And so when I say the online panel survey for FY23, that is the annual online panel survey. And so the intention is to take these surveys and triangulate them in order to highlight, to be able to talk more about trends and highlight the impacts of sports wagering using a comparison of these different surveys. In addition, we wanted to there will be an online panel survey report. So the online panel for 2024 complete, and a report will be delivered using the same template from FY23 with an expanded section on sports betting behavior that again continues to focus on trends. And there will be we're proposing an online panel survey for FY25. And as I said before, we really want to try to wrap all of this up by June 30th of 25. So there will be the collection, the analysis, and the report will all be done by that time. We are also proposing, as we do every year, for the past several years at least, an ad hoc report. And this is an opportunity for the commission, once the fiscal year starts, FY25 gets underway, it allows the commission to take a step back and identify what you think is a priority given what we know at that point in time. So it gives us a little bit more time to define specifically what we would like it to be. That said, it's always good to have a few options that are out there. So we have brainstormed a little bit with with Dr. Goldberg, Dr. Williams, and the SIGMA team in order to come up with a few options. Option one would be a host and surrounding community net impact. So taking a look at the economic activity that's pulled in versus given out to host and surrounding communities. So what is the net impact of economic impact of having a casino in Springfield, Massachusetts, or Plainville? Another, or Everett, sorry, I didn't mean to leave out our Everett casino. Another option would be to take a look at casino contracting to minority business and enterprises. And this would provide an opportunity for a deeper dive into how those monies are being allocated within the industry. Both I feel like are really good, really interesting options. Again, with the emphasis that we can contain that within the fiscal year. And Bonnie, if you could scroll down just a little bit further. And then there's always an option for something else, something that comes up that the commission wishes for us to explore and take that back to the team. And finally, the last report for the Sigma team on this list is a report on reallocation of sports gambling using the online panel survey of FY23 and the online panel survey of FY24. So in other words, it's working with the economic team, the UMass Donahue Institute, the social team, led by Dr. Volberg, and taking a look at a variety of different data sources to understand if people weren't spending money on sports wagering, how would that money be reallocated? Where else would that have gone? The last that we had put under this category of social and economic research relates to the Springfield Youth Health Survey. And so we actually have provided funding to this in the past. The Youth Health Survey, I think, is administered to Springfield youth age, and I think it's 8th, 11th, and 12th grade. I may be wrong, but anyway, it's part of a much larger survey that's being administered to Springfield youth. This provides us with an opportunity to add additional gambling related questions into that survey, which increases our power to be able to understand what the impacts of gambling are. I think it's really important that we provide some funding for this survey, because as we have provided funding in the past, it was only when there was a casino in Springfield. So I think it's another opportunity to get some information about maybe gambling and sports wagering impacts on underage youth.
Mark, I have a question, if you don't mind. So on the options, is that something the commissioners need to decide relatively soon, or are you going to let us know when we need to weigh in on that?
I think as in years past, we try to zero in on the topic by September sometime. So there's some time.
All right.
And you can choose one of those two options, or we can go in a different direction. But I think September is the timeline that we would need that, especially if we're trying to wrap this up relatively by June 30th.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving into public safety research, as Bonnie had mentioned, there's actually work in the field now for a study of public safety issues, crimes, calls for service, collisions in Plainville. This is on the heels of a similar study in Springfield that was released earlier this year, and Everett, which was, I believe, last fall. So we're wrapping up that. So this provides us an opportunity to maybe step back in FY25 with our research team and say, all right, we can combine all three of these reports and maybe make a broader statement about overall public safety impacts of casino gambling in the Commonwealth. And as an added benefit, we would be able to take a look, or the proposal is that we would use NIBRS data or statewide public safety data in order to be able to do some comparisons here. And moving on to the next topic, community engaged research. As Bonnie mentioned, we have funding now going to NORC on the youth sports study, and we have two that we're very close to funding. this is an ongoing commitment to community engaged research. And as I said before, and as former chairwoman Judge Stein pointed out repeatedly over the years, this is a really important line of research. This allows us to take a deeper dive into communities, however we're defining communities, in order to understand what are the impacts on some groups, some communities that are at greatest risk that we are not able to capture, and whether it's an online panel or the follow-up general population survey. So this is using some alternative methods in order to say more about communities at greater risk. An ongoing commitment would be to fund 1 to 2 more of these studies over the course of the next couple of years, as we have in the past. This is a proposal that we would level fund that. Then there's also, it's level funding within our funding source through the Public Health Trust Fund, but we would also really appreciate, and I really like the partnership that we have with the Community Mitigation Fund in the division in order to look at how we can extend our community engaged research through funding from the Community Mitigation Fund. Okay, moving down into data sharing. So we would of course want to continue to support MODE, the Massachusetts Open Data Exchange, as a repository for data sets, and add additional data sets as they become available. The biggest piece of this relates to Section 97 data, or the casino player data. We are in the final steps of building that infrastructure so that that data can be deposited and made available for research purposes. I can't underscore enough just how important this particular project is, and if the commission agrees, I think that it would be a worthwhile initiative to put some funding towards that, not just passively make it available as we have with other data sets, but say we wish to make some funding available for researchers to use this data to initiate some research projects that would be of interest to the commission. The responsible gaming evaluation, one study under here. So in 2021 and 2023, we did a study of positive play. Positive play is really defined as sort of behaviors that are indicative of lower risk gambling. And so the value of that for responsible gaming initiatives is to say what player segments are exhibiting positive play behaviors, what player segments, if broken down by demographics, are struggling in specific areas, whether it's gambling literacy, pre-commitment, honesty and control. And that has been used, especially through the GameSense program, to kind of define where our strategies are going and who our target audiences are and what that message is. The proposal would be that we would launch another positive play study in FY25, where we could then begin to have a better understanding of positive play and sports wagering behavior, and especially positive play and sports wagering behavior as it relates to other forms of gambling as well. Right, and moving down. So there's a couple studies. I've been talking a lot about sports wagering all along, both what's underway as well as in other parts of the proposed FY25 research agenda, but there's a few studies that we want to just zero in on. One is a study of student athletes. And as we've seen sort of a gap in existing research and a growing concern about the effects of sports wagering on student athletes, this is an opportunity to do a specific study in this context, looking through UMass Amherst student athletes at UMass Amherst, looking at impacts on this specific group. There's also an opportunity, another ad hoc study. Again, I think that probably somewhere around September, October, with maybe not quite as much of a rush, but setting aside specific dollars so that the commission can, in the fall, begin to define another sports wagering specific topic of interest for you. Bonnie, we're coming to an end here. So the research, I can't, another thing that's just incredibly important to our entire research project, the process, the rigor of our research, the independence of our research is the role of a research review committee, not the gaming commission, but an independent committee, research committee with expertise and specific research expertise in specific area in order to both provide advice on the front end as a research plan is being developed, as well as on the back end when a draft of a report comes in. We usually have 2 or 3 iterations of review between the research team and the research review committee before you see it. And so when a research project or report comes to the commission, you can have great confidence that there was an extensive process in place to review and provide feedback on these reports. We want to continue to provide and support this research review committee and probably expand it a little bit over the next fiscal year. And finally, knowledge translation and exchange, also identified in the research strategic plan that I mentioned at the top of this. We currently have an ongoing contract with RIO, the Gaming Research and Exchange of Ontario, to develop specific tools to develop materials that help mobilize the research that we have in place right now. So we would want to continue to do that. Perfect example of that was we did a very nice wrap up of all the research that was done in 2023, FY23, and brought that to the commission, continued to further refine and develop that. Our research snapshots are another example. While Bonnie is fantastic at that, there was a process of getting some advice and feedback from Grio on those too. So that I guess I'll pause there if there are any questions before I talk about next steps, if that's okay with you, Chair Maynard.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Fellow commissioners, any questions? First of all, I appreciate Mark going through this, but any questions we have at this point? Comments? All right, Director Van der Linden, I think that's a big view of support from your fellow colleagues here.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm sorry, I do have I'm a bit belated. I do have a question. So there's no action requested from the commission today. This is a proposed research agenda that you will take to the next step, which is GPAC, correct? Okay.
That is correct. So we brought this to the Gaming Research Advisory Committee. This is a non-statutory body, but an important body to provide feedback on ongoing research projects as well as advise on the upcoming research agenda. They did identify a few projects that the commission may wish to consider. Again, this is advice for the commission from this body. One was a study of video gaming and esports, including but not limited to youth under the age of 25 in associations with problem gambling. I would say this is an interesting study. I would be interested in sort of the transition between video gaming and gambling if we're going to take a look at this. And so video gaming, iGaming, sports wagering, and even casino gambling. But I think that there is a link there and it's probably an understudied area. Another recommendation was an evaluation of the voluntary self-exclusion program. And while we did an evaluation of this program early on out of the gates when Plain Ridge Park Casino opened, we haven't revisited that, and we've added sports wagering voluntary self-exclusion. We've refined the voluntary self-exclusion here and there along the way, so it does look different than what it did during that initial evaluation. So there's also a solid idea that would fall under that responsible gaming evaluation category. And
Mark?
then there's, yes, Commissioner.
Sorry, when was the last evaluation done or the initial?
I think it was wrapped up in 2018, but it covered a period from the opening of Plain Ridge Park Casino in 2015 to 2017. So I think it was reported in 2018, but a period report kind of captured data between 15 and 17.
Okay, so it does sound like it might be time for an update.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And the final, there was just a general comment about knowledge translation and exchange, that we have over 70 reports now that we've published since the gaming research agenda began. And I think there's some truths and facts that even on those early reports, combined with more recent studies, may be very interesting to the commission and inform our work as well as other policymakers. So with that said, as we are statutorily required to seek the advice of the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee, so we will certainly do that. So the process would be that we had the Gaming Research Advisory Committee providing this to you now as sort of a first pass. We would take it to the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee, and then I would bring it back to the commission, probably with a little bit more detail to these studies, with a final proposal for adoption that would align with budget, with the available budget.
So it sounds like we will have another bite at this apple.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Was that all you have on that topic, Director Vanderlyn?
That is, yes.
Well, thank you. That's, that was no easy task going through all the great work that you and your team do, and we appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Andrews. Also, so let's go to section B and talk about Problem Gambling Awareness Month. And I have to note that Commissioner O'Brien is wearing her really cool Game Sense jersey today. So
before I turn this over to Long Dan, if I could just say and try to tie this together, this research agenda really is about mitigating gambling-related harms. The focus on preventing gambling-related harms. It's embedded in our mission. It's embedded within what this research agenda is intended to do, to inform our responsible gaming activities, as well as other initiatives throughout the state through the Department of Public Health, in order to prevent and reduce gambling-related harms. March is Problem Gambling Awareness Month, and so we address that through evidence, and we address that through our practice and funding really important programs and initiatives out of the Gaming Commission. And so Long Dan, our fantastic responsible gaming manager, will provide sort of an update about what has happened through the month of March. So thank you, and Long.
Yeah, thank you, Director Vanderlyn. Good morning, Interim Chair Maynard and Commissioners. I did develop a presentation. If I may, I'm going to share my screen of the presentation. Okay, there we go. Okay, as Director Vanderlyn mentioned, March is designated as a Problem Gambling Awareness Month, or also known as PGAM. It's a nationwide grassroots campaign that seeks to increase public awareness of problem gambling and promote prevention, treatment, and recovery services. The two goals of PGAM are to increase public awareness of problem gambling and the availability of prevention, treatment, and recovery services, and to encourage healthcare providers to screen clients for problem gambling. 2024 theme for PGAM is every story matters. As PGAM comes to an end, I would like to present an update on PGAM in Massachusetts. MGC contracted with Archipelago Strategies Group, or ASG, to provide marketing strategies for GameSense. The marketing goal for 2024 was to increase awareness of prom gambling and prevention, treatment and recovery services to sports fans. ASG purchased podcast ads and music streaming through iHeartMedia. Phil Sherwood, the former chief communications officer at the Mass Council on Gaming and Health, developed 2 audio promotions that were used in the media buy. So I would like to play, the creation or the audio promotions. The first one is at 15 seconds.
Perfect.
Sometimes the audio is a struggle.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I'm streaming it from the internet, so I apologize if it's not coming clear.
No, can't hear it.
Oh, you cannot hear. I'm sorry. Oh, let me see. So let me stop sharing and see if that works. Let me try to play. Please let me know if this works.
We're not picking up anything.
No, it's not working.
Your background noise microphone is working really, really good because it's canceling. I can't hear anything.
Okay, I apologize, but I will send it to folks, and I will make sure it will be available on the website when we put it out. But there are 2 different audio promotions that were produced. There's a 15 seconds and a 30 seconds, but I will provide that. Apologize for the technical difficulties we're having.
Ron, there's some helpful information provided by John Scully if you want to take a look at that.
They might want to share and click.
And thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Click audio reshare. Okay. Okay, attempt number 2. Let's see if this works. Did that work, or were you able to? No.
Oh, well, we tried.
My apologies. But I will send the link with the audio promotion.
We are live and things happen, so we appreciate the attempt and the reattempt and sending that around.
Yeah, no worries. I will make sure that people will have a chance to listen to the 2 great audio promotions that was developed. Samantha Tobro and Zuhei Gonzalez at ASG provided the media buy data from March 4th to March 25th. So there were a total of about 938,000 overall impressions. Impressions are numbers of time ads were delivered with possible touch points. The campaign yielded about 203,000 reaches. So if you look at the podcast ads and the streaming audio, you combine the 2, that's sort of the reach. The reach is the ads that touched or interacted with the listeners. Through the relationships with ASG, iHeartMedia provided display ad. So there you see the display ad impressions of 80,000 touch or impressions. And this was kind of neat because it was free at no cost. And we actually, from that, we had about 58 clicks from the ads. 2 interesting discoveries from these marketing strategies were, one, there were environmental factors that impact on impressions and clicks. If you look at the very bottom data, you see that on March 16th, there was a spike in clicks. So, we discovered that spike, could be due to the commencement of March Madness. And so, it sort of indicated that there were environmental factors that spiked people's interest in learning more about the services and the programs and PGAM, what we offer. at GameSense. The other discovery is that, ASG discovered that or found that people were accessing the GameSenseMA.com website through the desktop. So it was interesting, and the data, we don't have it quite yet. ASG is going to put in, they provide a monthly data of all the GameSense MA's website's traffic and sort of looking at what medium. So here we do have the data on the impressions by device. You see that majority of the folks are listening to the podcast on their phone. However, we're finding that people are accessing GameSense MA's website actually through their computer, their desktop, not their phone. So that's some of the interesting findings, preliminary, where ASG has discovered. Okay. So on Tuesday, March 12th, 2024 was the Gambling Disorder Screening Day. This is we partner with Cambridge Health Alliance. The GameSense advisor utilized the 3 questions brief biosocial gambling screen, or BBGS. So this year, GameSense advisors actually administered the screening to the back of the house, or screen the staff at each properties. In total, in that one day, we had about 569 invited to screen. 77%, or 438, completed the screening. Out of the 438, 25%, or 111, screened positive. Screening positive indicated that they, answered yes to at least one of the 3 questions in the BBGS. And what was interesting was that we found that the 25%, or the 111 who screened positive, majority of them were male between the ages of 26 and 40. So that's something, we were fascinated to see.
What, what should we extrapolate from that piece of information?
So, and I think it's looking at it connects to some of the research that we found in sports wagering, that it is the same demographics. We were not able to capture the race, unfortunately, but we were able to capture the gender and the age range. And so it's congruent to what we're finding. And I think that's just, it's the population that we need to actively more target, or make sure that materials or information is delivered to that population. And then finally, at each property, the GameSense team engaged patrons. Oh, yes, Commissioner Skinner.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Could you go back to the previous slide? What was the follow-up, if any, to any of the individuals who had a positive screening? How is that dealt with? Is that something that a GameSense advisor would perhaps follow up and offer some additional information to these folks?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we partnered with Cambridge Health Alliance. So the Gambling Disorder Screening Day, if they screen positive, there's a list of resources that Department of Public Health has of providers that the GameSense advisor will connect. So we'll do a warm handoff. Because GameSense advisors are not clinicians, are not mental health providers, they are not able to provide clinical services, but they are there to connect. So to either connect with a recovery specialist, Jody, or to a provider within the location, and really sort of do that warm handoff and provide any resources or any other materials that would be helpful for the patron. And so it's really meeting them where they're at.
And that happened that day at the time of screening. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Commissioner Skinner, I think that's a fantastic question, and something Long was very focused to make sure that there was a follow-up for individuals that would be positive. And we knew that there would be a significant percentage of people that are positive. But this is also kind of what GameSense advisors do every day, front of house as well, as individuals who are struggling with gambling problem, whether or not it comes through in the BBGS or another instrument or measure, to make sure that resources are available, that they're connected, that they're supported in the way that they need or want to be supported.
Yeah, and like Dr. or Director Vanderlinden mentioned, we did meet with Cambridge Health Alliance to have that conversation. So if someone does screen positive, what are the resources? And so they were able to provide us with that. And so the GameSense advisor had that available for the screening. So if there was a positive screen, they were able to connect. And, we made it very clear we want a warm handoff, just because, we don't want folks to just leave if they screen positive. questions if I may go back. So as I mentioned, every week, that the Game Sense Advisor developed a theme or the topic. So week 1, it was play my way or play management. Week 2 was on college athletes and gambling. Week 3 was on resources, and finally on this last week is on positive play. And so this is important because the activities, if you look at the center bottom, is an example of the questions that the Game Sense Advisor incorporate into the activities. So some of the activities that that were offered or were demonstrated in each properties were, the positive play quiz, the swag wheel, marble activity, sports wagering quiz, the vending machine, March Madness quiz, Game Sense Jeopardy. And the vending machine, if you guys are not familiar, is a fabulous tool. Basically, it's a vending machine where the staff at the properties will go and, punch in the numbers that they're interested. Because of randomness, the price might not be what they anticipated. So it's really sort of teaching and talking about, the odds and the unpredictability. So it demonstrates, sort of understanding how the slot machine works. I think that includes any questions.
Any questions, Commissioner? I will say I enjoyed the picture of Amy on that slide. We all love Amy here. So with that, nothing else for Director Van der Linden, Dr. Bonnie, Long. All right. Well, thank you. We appreciate all this work. It's a lot of work. We appreciate what you did this month for PGAM, and we look forward to talking to you after you speak with GPAC.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Commissioners, do we need a
Sorry.
5-minute break?
Can I just add just one thing on the previous item? Just a thank you to all of the properties who participated in PGAM. Thank you.
I join Commissioner Skinner. I imagine my fellow commissioners do too. Do we need a 5-minute break, or do we want to keep going, commissioners?
I could take 5 minutes, please. Oh,
I got 2 things at once, so Commissioner O'Brien gets to break the tie. Let's take a 5-minute break.
I say I'm agnostic, so you got a 1-1 tie right now.
Yeah,
I can always use a break, Mr. Chairman.
We'll take a 5-minute break. Let's try to reconvene before 10:40, please. All right, thank you. All right, I think we can take the screen down. Okay. See if Mills is here. I guess we're still live, right?
Always live.
Great. So this is a reconvening of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. I will do a roll call since we're holding this virtually. Commissioner O'Brien,
Yep, I am here.
Commissioner Hill,
I'm here.
and Commissioner Skinner.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to agenda item number 8. And for that, we're kicking it back to legal with interim executive director and general counsel Todd Grossman. I think he will be joined by Counselor Young, Counselor Stimpick. Looks like Mina is on from A&K. And Dr. Lightbound is probably around too, given the topic. So to talk about 205 CMR 15.00, I'll turn it over to Mr. Grossman.
Well, thank you again. We're going to go right over to Ms. Young for this one. Judy, take it away.
Thanks, Todd. Let's see. Oh, it is still the morning. So good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Today we have for you the final draft of 205 CMR 15 horse racing meeting licensing. This regulation came before you once in October 2023 for initial review and discussion. It was put out for public comment for about 30 days. And then the draft regulation came before you again for a vote of approval to begin the promulgation process and become filing by emergency. So the regulation was filed by emergency in December of 2023, and then went through the requisite filing and promulgation process. A public hearing was held on January 9th, 2024, and no additional comments were provided to the Commission at that time. After the hearing, the regulation was sent to the Senate clerk and filed for 60 days as is required in 128A, Section 9B. So the reg is now back before you with an amended small business impact statement, and no substantive changes have been made to the regulation since its inception and original filing. So with that, I will kick it over to Mina to walk you through the reg, and I will be here to answer any additional questions you have.
Thank you,
Yes,
Judy. Good morning, Mina.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Mr. Chair. So as Judy mentioned, this has gone through the full promulgation process, including the special steps required for racing. The non-substantive change that you might notice is when it came before you in the fall, it was numbered 205 CMR 2. Now it's 205 CMR 15. That is simply a facet of a request from the Secretary of State's office on how they organize a code of mass regulations. So that's really it there. I can walk through, I'll be very brief since this has come up before. The regulation follows and incorporates from what the Commission has learned from other licensing processes to apply it for racing licensing. Section 202 starts by setting out the materials that each applicant must submit, including scoping surveys as appropriate, BEDs, mass supplements, et cetera. The application form and fees are all laid out there. There is then there's a couple of distinctions that are made for folks that have and sorry, I said 202, I meant 1502. I was looking at my older notes. The sequencing of submissions do differ slightly if an applicant is already a licensee versus a new licensee, but otherwise are effectively the same. That's the bulk of what you have in front of you on pages 148 and 149 of the packet is all of the information that goes into the application. The 1503 then gets into the evaluation of the application and the decision. It like other applications that you license, or other applicants that you license, I should say, there's opportunities for pre-application review. There is an initial step to ensure that the application is complete by the Division of Licensing that tracks language in some of the state and the sports wagering regs to make sure that that decision is limited to really a completeness review and make it clear that that doesn't mean you have a license yet. Following that, the commission under 15033 can refer the application or parts of it for advice and recommendation to the executive director, the bureau, other agencies to the extent appropriate, commission staff, et cetera, or a consultant. It has a public meeting under 15034. This is where I believe, if you recall, we had added in the requirement for in the regs to make it explicit that the commission have the reg in the municipality where the meeting is being proposed, the racing meeting is being proposed. And following that, the application is evaluated by the commission under 15035. And that has all of the factors that come from the racing statutes, 128A, but also some of the same kinds of considerations such as suitability, the interests of the public, et cetera, financial responsibility that are factors in some of your other reviews. The 1504 covers suitability. Again, very similar to what you are doing under other regulations. It is based on 205 CMR 215 in the sports wagering contests. Under 15042, an applicant or qualifier could be temporarily suitable based on attestations and a shorter investigation, or there's durable suitability similar to the durable preliminary suitability standards in 215. The distinction is that because racing applicants come back to every year, preliminary suitability is really replaced with an annual finding of temporary suitability. So that's just a change in the language. It's not preliminary and durable. The remainder of 04 gets into that process essentially. There are a couple of reserved sections that remain reserved for potential future expansion of the reg, advanced deposit wagering, licensing, fees for owners, trainers, et cetera, financial payments. Those are not being proposed at the moment. And I believe some of that came from sort of what had been in previously in this sort of work that, and Judy and Justin can elaborate if necessary, but are not part of today's reg. We're trying to keep the numbering consistent with other regs as well. 1508 mirrors 205 CMR 12 and 112 and 212, I believe, in requiring the ongoing cooperation and information submittals from applicants and licensees to make sure that the information you have is accurate and complete and can be acted on if there are changes. And then finally, including the applicable penalties for failure to cooperate with the commission or an agent of the commission or the bureau. The final part is 1509, which is the process for withdrawing of an application. As with some of the other licensing regs, there is a need to be sure that if an applicant withdraws, that they're not doing it in the midst of an investigation that might be revealing some information. So they're or creating a chaotic situation for employees and patrons. And so especially given the annual application. So there is a process to follow there as well. So that's a very high level overview. Again, this is one you've reviewed, voted on now several times, and has a slightly more cumbersome implementation process because it's racing related than the sports wagering and gaming regulations. So that's why we're back here again, but this should be the last step in your process.
Thank you, Mina. Commissioner O'Brien, it looks like you're reaching in.
So I know that one of the consternations in doing this was figuring out how to get suitability over into the horse racing side because it hasn't been there, and making sure IUB had enough time. So the temporary, seems to fit that bill. I just want to get confirmation, Caitlin's on, that this is workable for IB. I want to make sure we're not putting something out there where you're going to be having things like the BEDs, et cetera, the mass up submitted very, very close to when the October 1 deadline is, and then our 11/15 mandatory response.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. So IEB and legal worked closely together on the process for the reg on the first draft. And there is the sort of October 1 deadline for applications in the statute, right? So we recognize that in the reg. But what we've also done in the reg is sort of worked backwards and said, if you get in certain pieces of information in within certain amounts of time, we will be much more likely to be able to complete suitability by the November 15th decision deadline. If those materials aren't in by those days, or if something else arises, it becomes more complicated, it may not get done. So basically there's no guarantee in, if they meet certain timelines, it's likely that we'll be able to get the investigations done that need to be done. But if those timelines aren't met, or if things are more complicated, we would have to say, we're just not ready this year. It's not going to happen this year by the November 15th deadline. So we're working with those statutory dates, but also trying to give enough time to make sure a full suitability investigation can be done.
Right, because what I don't want to incentivize is papers getting dropped October 1, knowing that it can't be done by 11/15, right? And then going on to that temporary to get a toehold. So I don't know if there's any other way, and this is not for today's conversation, any other way to incentivize getting earlier submissions so that we're not faced with that 6-week window of us adjudicating and IB having to look at suitability.
Right. I think it's in a good place, and I'm happy to turn. I haven't looked at it, I'm going to be honest, that recently. But I don't know if Mina has any other comments, or Judy have any other comments on that piece of it. But I do think we make it very clear in the reg that if everything's not in,
sooner the better.
It's not gonna happen in that time period. So
that's right, Caitlin. And I think in either at the October meeting or the November meeting, we kind of had a brief discussion in regard to suitability materials and how any prospective applicant can request permission from the IEB, specifically the Division of Licensing, to begin submitting scoping surveys and materials early. Just so that it's not a mad dash from October 1st to November 15th for the commission, and specifically the IEB, to review a large amount of materials and be expected to reach a decision. So if anything, I feel like applicants have been put on, pretty sufficient notice to start getting their materials in as early as possible with this regulatory framework.
Right. Yeah, so I'm comfortable going this way. If we find ourselves in a circumstance where it's not workable, I would be open to the idea of advancing the deadline on terms of suitability documentation. I know the application and the decision are statutory, but whether we had any authority to say we would expect this in X months prior to October, I'd be open to that if it proves not to be workable.
Thank you for that, Commissioner O'Brien. And, part of this, I think, is, no pun intended, getting the cart in front of the horse, right? Which is what kind of has happened in the past, right? And trying to crunch the timeline. Dr. Lightbound, I feel like that's where you are probably on top of making sure that everyone knows this is coming, this is a change, this is different, and that they have to be willing to engage with us to ensure a timely decision.
Yes, and this, Ray has been in front with the commission, numerous times, and up for comment and all, and the different organizations that we knew might be interested were all made aware of that. And Commissioner Hill may want to speak to it, but the rest of you commissioners know as well that one of the letter to the legislature about some possible changes, one of them is to change the October 1 date and the November 15th date, and leave that open for the commission to decide. But obviously that's not in place right now.
So Commissioner Hill, Commissioner Skinner, any comments?
No comments.
All right. Well, thank you to Judy and Caitlin and Dr. Lightbound and Mina. We do have this marked up for a vote. So if we do have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission approve the amended small business impact statement and the draft of 205 CMR 15 as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today, and further that staff be authorized to take the steps necessary to file the required documentation with the Secretary of the Commonwealth to finalize the regulation promulgation process.
Second.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Hill. And the second from Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
And I'm yes. So that's 4 ayes. Congratulations on getting this done.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're moving on to item number 9. Deputy General Teresi is going to join us. I see Vice President General Counsel Roberts is here also. So Carrie, with that said, can you tell us a little bit about an update with the WynnBET cessation?
Of course. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. So as you recall, the Commission approved WynnBET's cessation of operations on February 28th. As part of its approved cessation, WynnBET had identified that for any futures wagers or parlay legs that would not settle during their 30-day wind down period, which was identified as the period of 30 days following the date on which they had notified patrons that they were ceasing operations, they would offer essentially fair market value settlements of those wagers. They had not completed all of those settlements as of February 28th, the date that the Commission issued its ultimate decision. So the Commission included a condition in that decision that WynnBET continue to offer to patrons with futures wagers and parlay legs that would remain unsettled after the 30-day wind down period, a settlement amount based upon a fair market valuation of the same bet in the Massachusetts market, which includes at a minimum the original stake return to the patron. At that time, the Commission also asked that WynnBET return and provide an update on those settlements after the end of the 30-day wind down period, and that period concluded on March 12th. So I will turn it over to Jennifer Roberts, Vice President and General Counsel of WynnBET, to provide you with that update.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission and Commission staff. I wanted to report that we have successfully settled 63 bets for 16 patrons. 5 of those were settled naturally as a loss because the selection did not meet the playoff contentions, but those were settled and paid out, and those checks are being distributed to those patrons as we speak.
So, Ms. Roberts, would you say it's fair to say that we're all complete?
I would say that we're nearly complete. We have a few accounts that need to be reviewed with staff, but and then we also have the unclaimed funds process that we will have to go through. But as far as the futures wagers, I would say that we are complete.
Thank you. Commissioner Skinner, I see that you have your mic off.
Hi, Ms. Roberts.
Good morning.
What is the nature of the accounts that need to be reviewed by staff, if you would?
Yes, those would be what we consider suspended accounts and anything that we have not had resolved with patrons with those accounts suspended with funds remaining. That would be the nature of the discussion.
Okay, and you've already conducted outreach to those individuals at this point? Is it just a matter of catching up with them to get them to respond? How has the communication been left, if any at all?
So those would be potentially accounts that may have been suspended for further investigation. So
Okay.
It would be not necessarily something we would communicate with patrons because of maybe certain activities. So it would be a status of those accounts. We're in the process of completing that review internally, and we'll work with staff to get those resolved.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Of course.
Any further questions? we just really missed you, Vice President Roberts, and had to bring you back. So
Always happy to come back.
every time you think you're done, we pull you back in. So we appreciate that. Anything else to provide, Carrie?
Nope, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. And I have to say, I appreciate Carrie's diligent work on this. I know it's been very appreciated, and the partnership from WynnBET, and we're happy that we were able to make this process work.
Thank you. The commission staff has been great to work with, so much appreciated.
Thank you. All right. With that, we're going to go to item number 10, and we're going to move to our sports wagering division. I see Andrew Stephanon. Looks like we have a couple of issues coming up. First, Andrew, you're going to deal with the sports wagering operator wager limitations issue.
Yes, correct. Good morning, commissioners. Yeah, again, the only item I have for your review today begins on page 161 of your packet, and this is a discussion only around the topic of sports wagering operators imposing wager limits or limitations or additional wagering restrictions on their customers. This is being brought forward today as it originally stems from a comment made from the public submitted last year, bringing forward the question if the operators are permitted to conduct this sort of business practice. And it wasn't until recently that our division was able to fully investigate this topic. We took the time to fully review the related regulations, performed an extensive review of the operator's house rules, including their terms and conditions on this topic, as well as their approved internal controls. We also discussed with our legal team, and then lastly met with separately with operators who provided much further insight and additional information, providing a general overview of wager limitations. We'll start today by quickly defining wager limits in sports betting, just to give you an overview, revisiting the regulations on the topic, and then relating the regulations to the approved house rules, reading some terms and conditions, and then turning it over for questions and discussion. So to start, what is a limit or wager limit in sports betting? The limit indicates the maximum wager amount permitted for a particular event. These limits are determined by the sportsbook operators themselves. Sportsbooks set limits for risk management, and then more importantly, to preserve the integrity of the sporting event taking place. Limits help maintain fair competition and prevent undue influence of bets on the outcome of games by preventing excessively large bets or bets looking to take advantage of certain situations. And we'll get into those shortly. Also, limits are determined on a per customer basis. An example of a wager limitation may be you try to place a if you're a limited patron, you try to place a $1,000 wager, and the sportsbook will flag it immediately and say that you can only bet $120 on this particular wager, just as an example. Next, if we want to move on to the regulations, if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen with the regulation language pulled up. It is also in your memo, but seeing it all together may be helpful as there is some additional language you can read together. So bear with me. I always hope that I'm sharing the right screen. Can you see the regulation language?
Yep, we see it.
Okay. So we have identified two regulations surrounding wager limits, the first being 205 CMR 247.02, section 3, subsection L, where it mentions maximum payouts. And I'm going to scroll back up to the top just so we can follow this closely. Oh, pass it. 247.02 is the regulation requiring operators adopt comprehensive house rules for their customers and make it accessible to the public. As you're aware, these are the same house rules approved by the commission at launch, as well as any subsequent changes that we bring forward. Moving on down to section 3 of the house rules. It lists all the required items that must be addressed at a minimum. And as you can see, it is an extensive list. I'll scroll all the way to the bottom just so you can see how extensive it is. And we're going to focus on letter L, subsection L, maximum payouts must be addressed. Again, it's in your memo, but I'll read it verbatim here. However, such limits must only be established through limiting the amount of a sports wager and cannot be applied to reduce the amount paid to a patron as a result of a winning sports wager. Our interpretation of this is an operator can limit an initial sports wager by a patron, but cannot reduce the amount paid for a winning ticket. So after an event is settled, the operator may not pay out less than was already awarded to the customer if they are limited for limiting purposes. Moving to the second regulation that we've identified is 205 CMR 247.08, which addresses minimum and maximum wagers and additional wagering requirements. Again, it's in your memo, but I'll read verbatim from the regulation on my screen, starting with section 1. Unless otherwise directed by the commission, there is no limitation as to the minimum or maximum wager a sports wagering operator may accept. This rule does not preclude a sports wagering operator from establishing its own minimum or maximum wagers or limiting a patron sports wager for reasons considered necessary or appropriate by the sports wagering operator. Further, in section 2, a sports wagering operator shall provide notice of the minimum and maximum wagers in effect for each sporting event or wager category and any changes thereto in accordance with 205 CMR 24703. Section 3. And section 3 just addresses how patrons can wager below or above established minimum or maximum limits, usually upon patron request. And then lastly, section 4 states nothing in 24708 shall preclude an operator from establishing additional wagering requirements consistent with their house rules. But the language we'll focus on is in section 1. And again, this language, again, I'll reread it. This rule does not preclude an operator from establishing its own minimum or maximum wagers or limiting a patron's wager for reasons considered necessary or appropriate. So we have those 2 or 3 sections in 24708, as well as the house rules that we've read, limiting a sports wager where an operator may only establish through limiting the amount of a sports wager, not the amount of a winning ticket. Moving down to the House rules excerpts in your memo, all the House rules contain similar language related to maximum payouts and limitations. For example, BetMGM states maximum payouts shall only be established through limiting the amount wagered and cannot be applied to reduce a winning wager amount, as we've just read in our regs. Caesar states the maximum wager can be restricted or increased based on internal management review per customer, based on sport or event, and includes all wager types. DraftKings reserves the right to limit the maximum bet amount and may be lowered in its sole discretion. All bet selections are subject to pre-imposed limits set solely at DraftKings discretion, which may be lower than the limits mentioned in the sport-specific limits. Even the retail books have similar language, as you can see on the next page of the memo, where Encore Boston Harbor Management will determine the minimum and maximum wagers on all events and can set a lower or higher wager amount per patron for any offered event or wager type. Lastly, and this is not in your memo, but each operator also has terms of service or terms and conditions where this is also addressed. 2 examples I pulled up earlier in Fanatics terms and conditions. It stated that Fanatics, quote, reserves the right to limit the amount you can deposit into your account for any reason or to otherwise limit the amount you can bet. You agree to abide by those limits. And then for PSI or ESPN Bet, it states PSI reserves the right to refuse or limit any wager or bonus, for example, by setting minimum or maximum amounts, which will be set out in betting rules, or by setting wager requirements, or change such limits at its sole discretion for any reason whatsoever without notice to you. And if you look back at the regulation in 24708 section 2, it only states that an operator shall provide notice of the wagers in effect for each sporting event and those changes, not provide notice to the actual individual's limits have changed. And that's all I prepared for the memo portion of your packet. I would like to open it up for any discussion as intended. I'm prepared to answer a few questions on what is deemed necessary, appropriate, or perhaps touch on some other customer comments. But I'll leave that to you, commissioners, on how you wish to steer this conversation today. But as I do close here, commissioners, this is not meant to be an end-all discussion on this topic by any means, but rather just notice that our operators are currently complying with our established regulations. As I said at the start, we did meet with the operators, we reviewed internal controls and terms and conditions, and we ensured that the approved House rules on this topic meet the minimum requirements of the regulations. However, if the commission does have additional interest in this topic, we do have ways to explore those options with our licensees or even revisiting this section of the regulation at a later date. But with that, I will turn it over to you for any discussion or questions that I may be able to help answer. Commissioner?
Thank you, Manager Steffen. Commissioner O'Brien, I see your microphone's on.
Thank you. Andrew, thank you for the overview of the regs. The thing that really has been jumping out at me looking at this is, I think it's accidentally omitted from the memo. You read it in the actual reg at the end of 247.081, that it is by the sports wagering operator. And when you go and you look through your recitation of how it's done, there's a lot of language saying, you know, basically at the discretion of the management. they reserve the right, the licensee would reserve the right to accept or reject certain requests if you're trying to go over minimum and maximum. And what struck me is that, from my view, this is sort of the beginning of our conversation, because it seems to me that the reg and their house rules put a tremendous amount of discretion in their hands in terms of, and there's a business reason for some of it, right? Like laying off to make sure you're balancing, what you're putting out there. But there's a deeper issue here in terms of individual patrons. And I think we've all talked about this, particularly in light of some of the coverage that's been out there recently, the Wall Street Journal article about the VIP and how they extend credits to VIPs on individual things. Then we've had the queries of people saying, well, why am I limited in what I could put in? What's the rationale for that? And you point out that their house rules very vaguely talk about, management in their sole discretion, management reviews and approves. What I'm curious to know as a commissioner is, what's the basis for that? How and why are they making these determinations? Because I think that's critical to whether we need to amend this reg. And also, I think would help us as we go forward. Mark talked about some of this, the research we're doing on AI, whether or not we're going to be moving into a reg that's going to require some of the information that may very well go into those determinations, whether we're going to have them, proactively using that to flag problem gambling. And particularly the query that went out from Senator Blumenthal this week that went to, I think with one exception, all of our licensees that are active, asking for some information on this. Just as an aside, I as one commissioner would really love for them to give us copies of whatever they're submitting in the April 8th response to Senator Blumenthal. Because to me, this is the beginning of our conversation. So I thank you, Sports Wagering, for kicking us off. But I do feel like we're going to be doing a deeper dive in this as we go forward.
Yeah, certainly. And I am prepared to answer what is deemed necessary and appropriate, if that may answer part of your question, Commissioner O'Brien.
I think it's more, my guess is that as we ask them to come in and tell us how, I would fully expect some of this for them to say, look, this is proprietary, right? In terms of how I'm functioning. And they may want to do that in an executive session. To the extent we can have public conversations about it that guide it in a general way, that's great. But I do think some of the questions we're all going to have may go deeper into proprietary choices.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. Commissioner O'Brien, thank you for that. And as you were talking and as I was looking over the packet, I thought this could be right for two different things. One is a roundtable, right, that is public, and B, an executive session talking about kind of what the operators view as the rationale, as you put it. Another piece I was thinking about is, what's the fairness to the patron in the notification, right? We did get some outreach, just so the public knows, through emails. And there were several folks who said, hey, I'm betting pennies when I'm putting in the bet. And so, what's the notification, right? And if you're turning off a winning wagerer, are you turning off a losing wagerer, to Commissioner O'Brien's AI point? But that being said, something I've been thinking about. Commissioner Skinner, I see your microphone's off.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner O'Brien, I hear you. I also hear you, Chair. I feel the same way. I was reminded as I was preparing for today's meeting of the comment that we got, I believe it was in July of 2023. It might have even been before that, as well as reviewing the comments that we received over the past several days. That for me, this is about fundamental fairness and transparency to the consumer, to patrons, where you have a situation where a patron is losing and being encouraged through, outreach by an operator's VIP staff and incentives. What's the balance when that same patron begins to win? So I think that is something that needs to be explored, and it really is about, and I understand that there's are probably legitimate business decisions that are made by our sports wagering operators here. I don't discount any of those, but I do think there should be a way for patrons to really understand what might get them limited. When we review these excerpts, and overwhelmingly, as Commissioner O'Brien said, it really is at the operator's discretion, and there's no real way for a patron to understand what's happening. And oftentimes, the chief complaint is that the operator won't let them know what has happened. I think that our regulations, yes, require the house rules to speak to minimum and maximum wagers, but I just don't think that that goes far enough in addressing some of the concerns and complaints that we've heard about over the past few more so in the past few days. So the other question is how much of an issue is this, right? Because aside from this week, I think it was just that one prior comment, might have been two, but really it's just how big of a problem is this, and can we find that sweet spot such that the sports wagering operators are protected in terms of their business model, and the consumer is protected.
Well said, Commissioner Skinner. Commissioner Hill?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman. I agree with both of my fellow commissioners and the thoughts that they have given us today. Today's the start of a conversation that's going to continue. And I think the public needs to understand that we are going to take this very seriously. And I like the idea that we have a round table on this issue, but I also feel strongly we need to get our operators in here and ask some very hard questions. And if we have to go into an executive session, so be it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. I think the team hears where we're coming from on this. I hope that we can maybe get this scheduled and then, at least start talking about scheduling in the next week or so. And happy to continue this conversation. All right. So we'll move on to, we're going to stick actually with the sports wagering. We're going to go to Manager Crystal Boscheman, who's going to talk a little bit about Bally's operational plan. She did, at the urging of the commission, reach out to Bally's, and I think she has some information.
Good morning. It's still morning. Good morning. I'd say brief correction there. Bruce, Director Band, actually did the outreach there. And I do have a little bit of an update, and being it looks like I'm last, I promise not to hold you up. It's really short. So the sports wagering division, as well as other key staff to this process from MGC, met with the launch team on Monday from Bally's. And in that meeting, they did share their project map and timelines as for the next couple months. And they articulated that they understood the requirements for the certificate of operations, and they had no issues with any element of the letter that we'd sent telling them what the preparation was and what the needs are. Which we sent that last week, outlining the particulars. I think some of you may have seen that, but it was a pretty detailed list of exactly what would need to take place before that happened. In addition, they noted that they have had initial conversations with GLI related to our jurisdiction, which GLI actually confirmed. We spoke with them on Tuesday. And I think the key update is that going forward, we're going to be meeting with them every 2 weeks, which we have done with other operators as they launch, just to discuss status updates and any identified issues to make sure everything moves forward as planned and everyone's in touch with who they need to be within the organization to make sure all questions are answered, reporting is set, and the requirements are met. So that is my brief update, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Crystal. I see Commissioner O'Brien has her microphone on.
So, yeah, thank you, Crystal. And if you can't answer this, you can't answer this in public, but is there an anticipated date? Because I think all five of us, Commissioner Skinner could have asked this question to bring it to the fore, but I think all of us are interested in seeing them in front of us or getting a more concrete understanding of their timeline.
Yeah, certainly we can facilitate that. there didn't seem to be any hesitance. We can arrange that. I'm not certain because I don't have the timeline in front of me, though I believe it was around July. So, and that's, you know, anticipated timelines. So we could see where that truly lands. But yeah, absolutely. I think that if you want them on a future meeting, we'll just get that set up for you guys. So
I would like to hear from them. I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was going to suggest that, or ask, I actually thought they were going to be here today. So unless I misinterpreted something from the last meeting, I too would like to see the representatives come before us.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Commissioner Skinner?
Nothing much to add other than to say, you know, that's where I was last meeting in making the request that they appear. So
I would join my fellow commissioners and only say that, you know, we're excited. This is a peerless approach, right? As we've said over and over again, this commission, and we're excited to see where they're taking this. And we want to make sure that, you know, Massachusetts is getting the attention it needs, and that the people of the Commonwealth are being well represented by this commission. So it's not out of malice, but actually towards of interest and support that we want to bring them in, at least from my perspective. So I think you've got your direction, Manager Boschman. Any questions for us?
nope, I don't think so. We'll work with Grace on what the dates are coming up and see when we can get them on the agenda. And I'll try to take care of that before the next agenda setting meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for the work, and appreciate Bruce too and the work that he put in, Director Band. Okay, so that takes us to number 11 and commissioner updates. Do we have any commissioner updates? I'll just briefly say that we are planning on attending an event at TD Garden with the Attorney General, President Baker from the NCAA, Marlene Warner from the Mass Council. Our own Commissioner Hill will be representing us, and we're excited about that, as well as other key stakeholders. I think it's going to be a great event to discuss how we can tackle underage sports wagering, which everybody in this building here at the Massachusetts Gaming Commission is interested in. So that's my only update. Any other business that we didn't anticipate? All right. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner O'Brien. Second from Commissioner Hill. Roll call. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
aye.
And I'm yes. Thank you, everyone, for attending the meeting.